Good evening to you all. I am currently in my hometown of Leadville, where I had the great fortune to get to do another ski marathon today. It was a rough race. It was hard conditions, some wind-blown snow, but it was awesome. It's one of the most beautiful tracks out there, and so I'm in seventh heaven, having been able to take time to do that today. I wanted to begin this Punctibyte for your last week of February. Time flies when you're having fun. To talk just a little bit about your lectures, I wanted to note that nearly everyone I have been observing has improved in their lectures since we talked about some of the strategies for improving your lectures. And I have actually been fortunate to get video footage of some of you. I'm working my way through individual TAs and trying to make sure that I get video footage of everyone so that you can have a chance to look at that. And all I do with that is just hand you my phone and I have a set of headphones and I say, check it out and tell me what you can do better. So it's a really individualized coaching moment. And speaking of individualized coaching moments, things are going really well with the rubric skills assessment. And I actually want to take a minute just to talk about that rubric and to talk about how to use that rubric. At this point, I realize that a large number of students are already through with the rubric, and so we're not wanting to change anything right now, but I want to make some notes just for future reference to help you in how to best give feedback with the rubric. They can be super great tools for facilitating learning. And I think already we're really seeing that. This is so much better than a practical exam because it's like getting coaching. You actually are working one-on-one with individual students. They can come back and they can improve. And that's one of the largest things, is that there's room for failure on this. So you can fail and try again. And that is a really key element of this sort of assessment. One note on the categories. I want you to make sure that before you grade next time, that is when we get to the final rubric, I realize again that we're most of the way through with this one, but I want you to make sure you really read through the categories, because when you look at competent as a category, essentially what this says is the microscope was efficiently focused and the image was effectively described. That is where a majority of students should be ranking. The only time that we would ever give an accomplished is when we feel like we could take that student and immediately put them on virtual edge as an exemplary example of what the technique we're looking for should look like. Those will be by far the minority of scores that we will give. We will probably give a lot of evolvings the very first time that someone does a skill, because that just means that they're not fluid yet. That is, it was choppy. They had to stop a little bit. They had to redo, or they had to go back, or, maybe it just was a little bit of bobbling. That's an evolving mark. So I think that it's important to actually read what these categories say. And for now, let's leave it as it is, and of course be consistent in your assessments, so don't change things at this time. But I wanted to have that out there for when we do get to the final, which you'll notice that this is just here a second tab, that this actually has less on it. And I did that by design because I wanted the stress to be lower towards the end of the semester. That is, to have less that students were worried about towards the end of the semester, a little more at the beginning, because of course most things are in the opposite order of that. So this allows us to nicely talk about what's up and coming in terms of scheduling, because as I mentioned, this is a busy time, and this week will be more busy than most, and I really appreciate, I saw that, I think it was Trevor, scratched me off the list for giving the lecture, and I definitely appreciate your hard work and your effort in giving a lecture that's a little bit complicated. I mean, understanding transformation and horizontal gene transfer is something that takes a little bit of study. So I'm really appreciating all of the work that I know is going in for all of you giving that lecture on the 25th. It's very appreciated. We'll be doing the exam that day, and I think all of you are so incredibly wonderful at helping me to hand exams out and to get students situated into the rooms where they can take those exams. We do also do Lab 12, and I've gotten a couple questions about this. There really is no Lab 11, but because it's very difficult for me to renumber labs, this is because I would have to renumber and redo everything all the way from the ground up, including Virtual Edge. And so we call it lab 10 and 11, even though the only thing that they're doing in lab 11 is just preparing their plate for lab 12. So it's just a prep step for lab 12. And lab 12 is the bacteriophage lecture. So it's in that lecture that we'll actually be introducing the concept of viruses and talking about viruses, different morphologies, and of course, the lytic pathway is our primary focus for that one. Trevor and Josh, you guys are up for open lab, and I guess that also includes Wheezy, of course. And so if you guys need someone to cover you, make sure you start thinking about making that happen. And by the way, along those lines, we were finally able to purchase our tickets for the ski team national event, which will be the next and last time that I miss class, is for the week of the 10th through the 14th for nationals. I know that Joe and Callie and also Mara are going to help cover those labs, but I also wanted to make note that due to an extensive price difference, we're having to leave on the morning of the 7th. It was the difference between $500 plane tickets and $240 plane tickets. So we just simply had to go with the morning of Friday the 7th. So what that means is if, I don't know if Joe or Callie or Wheezy or anyone can help to cover open lab that day, I would be looking for people as volunteers. I need somebody who does already have their undergraduate degree to be a supervisor there. So just let me know, and I would love to have your assistance. Okay, I think we'll take a moment to go into the lab 10, 11, and 12 and 13 lecture guidelines. We already spent quite a bit of time talking about lab 10, so I'm not going to belabor that lab, but I do want to remind you that it's ever so important that you begin the lab right away on that day. They need to work their way through steps 1 through 6 and put their tubes on ice, and once they have that done, then we can give the lecture. The lecture will either take 20 minutes or more than 20 minutes, and then we'll finish the lecture during the 30-minute incubation. Also, during that 30-minute incubation, they can do their lab 11, and they can also collect and record results for their prior lab 9. We should see some really interesting things looking at antiseptics and disinfectants, but please do bear in mind that those are purely qualitative results. That is, we can't compare quantitatively the diffusion rates of the different antiseptics and disinfectants. And so we really have no use for a ruler in that lab at all. We just have to give kind of qualitative comparative data. That being said, there was one other thing that I thought I wanted to mention on this lab. Actually, it kind of relates between lab 11 and 12, and that is that I don't think we did a very good job of covering the concept of what CFUs and PFUs. Obviously, we haven't gotten to PFUs yet, but I don't think we did much on CFUs. That is colony forming units. That is a weird lingo term for cells, because one cell makes a colony. So we would call it a colony forming unit. So that's another way that you could label your final titer data, like when you're figuring the titer of a beginning tube. Also on that note, I think for future, we're going to change how we assess dilution problems, because in future, in practice, the thing that is most common to need to be able to do is to actually figure out how you're going to dilute something if given an initial culture titer. So that's really probably where we should go, just maybe say something along the lines of, if we know that this tube has moderate to heavy turbidity, meaning somewhere around 10 to the 8 to 10 to the 9th, how might you go about designing a dilution scheme that would give you countable colonies on at least one set of plates? So that would be a more realistic assessment. So it's something we can think about future semesters. I know some of you are going to be gone, totes graduating, but if you are going to be around, you can help me with that as our future goal. In lab 11 and 12, it's a fairly straightforward lab, just talking about viruses, bacteriophage. It's really a fun lab, but it's also one where they have a lot of logistics as far as getting those 3 plates overlaid with top auger. That top auger solidifies fairly rapidly, so it's important that once they go to the back hot water station, they're ready to go and they have all their tubes ready to go and everything that they want to add to it. So one of the things that makes this lab a little bit trickier is that we're also trying to deal with their transformation data, and we need to go look at them under the UV light. Sometimes I go back with every single group and talk to them. Sometimes I choose in the larger classes to just go through the take-home messages with the group and then send them back in small groups. Partly it just depends on how tired I am at that particular moment. And so we can take turns potentially taking them back to talk about their plates. We'll see how that buffs out and how that works out well on that Thursday. Okay, I think that is most that I want to mention from that, but Lab 13 is coming up, and this brings a couple of things to mind. First of all, it's just a note that we do not have a Lab 14. Remember that Lab 14 was the practical. We don't have the practical anymore, so there's really literally no Lab 14. So we go from Lab 13 right into Lab 15. So Lab 13, Fungus Among Us, is actually quite a difficult lecture, and for some people it's not the topic that they feel the strongest with. If that is so, have me either give the lecture, or it's really cool to tell you that Tara has asked if she can come and give that lecture for certain lab sections. So please let Tara know. If you know Tara, you've worked with her before, and you want her to come give your lecture that day, she would be honored. She would be, so excited if you contacted her and had her come and give that particular lecture. She really enjoys it. I have tried to give a lot of background on this lecture to help you if you are delivering it and maybe fungus is not your biggest forte, fungal forte. If that is the case, then this hopefully will help give you a little bit of background information. I also encourage you to go online and find information that is out there about the fungal world. It probably is one of the most fascinating of all areas of life, I believe, of our eukaryotic microbial world. So take some time with it, even if you don't plan to give the lecture, to learn a little bit more about it. Okay, I think that does cover most everything. I hope that it does. Again, as always, please reply to all if you have anything to add to this Punctibyte that might be helpful, particularly returning TAs. I probably should put something right here at this moment for returning TAs to see if they're actually watching the Punctibyte. Say, if you're a returning TA and you're watching this Punctibyte, send me an email that says some funny microbial joke or something. Yeah, that's awesome. Have a fantastic rest of the weekend.